While there have been a lot of different kinds of builds, experiments, and things like that on this channel that have pretty much been from something fairly basic to something overly complicated, I decided that this time I'm just gonna break it down to the very, very basics of everything, which means literally a breakdown, disassembly of a guitar. Now you can look at this from the perspective of getting a guitar into the workshop for maintenance purposes from a customer and then tearing it down and doing whatever work you do to it and then putting it back together again according to the customer's liking. Now, while that is all fun and games, I decided that this would need a little bit of a twist. So I have some filming help coming along. My good friend Ionic Gecko, once again, that you have seen on this channel a couple of times, he's gonna be helping out filming, but he has no idea what's coming. While I'm gonna talk about all the parts that go into making a guitar, while I'm taking this instrument apart, he's gonna be the one who's gonna assemble it. He has no experience with guitars. He doesn't know what he's doing. So I predict that this will go interestingly. All right, so as prefaced in the intro there, what we're gonna be doing is we're gonna take this Relic Telecaster and we're gonna be tearing it down, kind of going through, making sure that we gather up all the information as if this was a customer guitar that came in the shop for a little bit of TLC. So, first and foremost, if this were the case that it was a customer brought in an instrument, we're just gonna have a look over and see if there's any sort of things that we need to address on the outside. Now, with this being a Relic instrument, while it already has a bunch of nicks on it, to say the least, we don't want to put in any more. So let us just have a look here. It's a bit dusty, but we'll clean everything up. But apart from that, looks all right. Now, we also need to make sure to check what tuning this has come in at. Yeah, so it is in drop C. Make sure that the electronics work. Plug that into the amp. See if there's anything we need to do with them. Volume works. Tone works. Now, as I go through dismantling this entire guitar, we're also gonna have a look at all the components that go into a guitar. So if you are new to guitar building, fixing up guitars, or if perhaps you're now dealing with your very first guitar yourself and kind of want to learn the ins and outs, we're gonna go through what makes up a guitar and why it works the way it does. Let us start by checking also the action for the strings. So what the action is essentially the height at which the strings are away from the fret. So by using a ruler, I'm going to check from the top of the fret to the bottom of the string, and I just checked that that was 1.5 millimeters. We're also going to check how far the pickup is from the bottom of the strings. The way to do that, to make sure that the action there is great, is to fret the last fret and then onto the pole piece. So on the pickup here, you'll see that there's these screws. We call those pole pieces or lugs. Check that that indeed is 2 millimeters away. I'll show that for the camera as well. So 2 millimeters away from the bottom of the string. Now we have everything we need to start taking this apart. And keep all that in mind when we start putting things back together again. Loosen off the strings. And we also have what might be very common is that a customer might bring their own strings. In this case, we have a back of opened DR strings. We're gonna see if those work. If not, we have a new set of strings as well available. So loosening up all the tuners. and then taking the strings off like so. Now there's a lot of people online who always joke about cutting the strings off like in full tension and then the guitar exploding on you or damaging the guitar. While yes, not recommended to do that, it's not going to damage your instrument. If it does, there was something already wrong with your instrument to begin with. There, and then the final one, like so. Now, because I'm lazy, I'm not going to be bothered to pull the entire string all the way through the guitar, because this is what you would call a string through guitar, which means that the strings literally go through the guitar onto the other side. Now, I'm not bothered to pull them all the way through, so I'm just going to cut them here. A nice, neat little package, like so. And then pull the strings through. Right. Now I guess the easiest place to start dismantling things is taking off the neck and taking off all the components on the neck. So that is what we're going to do. I'm going to start with the tuners. So tuners or machine heads, meaning the same thing. These are, as you saw there, where the strings go through. And how you tune your guitar up to tension and the tuning that you prefer. There's multiple different kinds of tunings. These are just your run-of-the-mill, fairly cheap looking tuners with a screw. And we also, now I noticed that there are different holes drilled in for the screws, so we need to make sure that when we screw these tuners back, we put the screw in the correct hole. It's always good to be prepared with a few different sizes of screwdriver for this. Now, a tuner assembly pretty much works as the tuner body, then a nut and a washer. And we're going to remove all of those. You can either use a spanner. I forgot the word for it now. Spanner.
Pretty sure it's a spanner.
Yeah. Socket wrench. Or what you can also buy are these handy little cubes that have different size for different sizes of thread and nut. So I am gonna...
Do you know what that's called?
This was just, I think it was, what was it? It was some cube. I bought this from Stu Mac. Does it say on it? No, sorry, Hosco. Multi-cube, yeah.
Right.
And yeah, pretty much like a very, very handy tool for this sort of thing. And this is specifically made for guitar builders in mind. There. Remember, lefty loosey, righty tighty. Oh man, that's stuck in there pretty well. Let's see if I can get it out with this. There we go. So now you're seeing me use all the aforementioned tools pretty tightly in there. So yeah, there we have the tuner itself, the machine head, the washer, and the nut. Some of these are coming off pretty well, so it's just the one that had a little bit of issue on it. And whenever you're taking apart, well, actually, anything. If you're taking something apart and putting it back together again, it's nice to keep track of all your screws and little bits and bobbins so that they don't go missing. And while I will be putting this back together again fairly soon after this entire ordeal, if you're having some days in between or a longer period of time, it's good to have a sort of, maybe like a bowl or cup or something like that that you can put everything into. I've also used little Ziploc bags in some cases. Also, a good rule of thumb, anytime you're working with any type of screw or any type of thread, if you're feeling tension do not try and force it, because you might break the screw. And then if you break a screw inside something, you're just causing a whole lot more headache for yourself. And it's not worth it. Clearly been a little bit of repair on this guitar previously, because one tuner is not like the others. Come on.
One thing,
music and everything else.
I should have just said it, but when we started, I was like, we should probably do an audio sync.
Don't need to.
Oh wait, yeah, you're right, because this is plugged right into the... Never mind.
Yeah, you're used to the old way of doing things.
Yeah.
Things have improved since the ye olden times. We have now dismantled the tuners. Next thing to go are the string trees. Now, string trees are not specific to every single guitar that you might have. There are essentially two different kinds of headstocks for a guitar. So the entire piece where your tuners are held, that is called the headstock of the guitar. And there are scooped headstocks, which would be the sort of Fender headstock, which is this. So it's a flat piece of wood that scoops up to the fretboard, which is why it's called a scooped headstock. Now, another alternative to this would be in an angled headstock, like so. Now, this would be what you would call or more commonly, people would recognize this as being a Gibson headstock. So it's angled back instead of just having a flat piece that scoops up to the neck. Now, the reason why that is to apply the correct amount of tension onto the nut and the correct amount of angle so that there is proper tuning stability when you're playing. Now, if you wouldn't have string trees on a scooped headstock like this, the tuning stability might suffer a little bit for some of the strings. So essentially what string trees do is they force an angle onto the nut. So that's the nut, and the string tree forces that string to go underneath there to provide the proper angle for proper tuning stability. And in general, just kind of like helps with strings staying in the nut itself. So let us remove this. And you might see guitars with two, you might see guitars with one, or in some instances you might see a bar here that applies pressure onto all the strings. That's usually most commonly with floating trem systems and stuff like that. String tree and the screw that comes with. And these come in a bunch of different various shapes and sizes, but the main principle is the same. Now, we could take off the nut, but this seems to be pretty well glued in there, so we're not going to do that. It's not necessary to always glue in the nut, because essentially the strings are what keep the nut in place. You might add a little bit of a drop of super glue just to keep that in place, but this one seems to be pretty tightly in there, so we're going to leave it so it doesn't break off anything. Right, moving on to removing the neck. Now, there are different kinds of guitar construction methods. There is a phone. So there are different kinds of construction methods. There are different kinds of construction methods for guitars when it comes to how the neck joins the body. Now, in this case, which is pretty much the most common case that you would come up with, some might argue that the set neck would be a little more common due to classical instruments being set necks, but this is what we would call a bolt-on neck, because it's not bolted on, but it's screwed in place. And then there are set necks, which are guitars where the neck is glued to the body, and then there are neck throughs, which, by the sound of it, it's a neck that goes all the way through the body as one continuous piece, and the body is just two wings on either side. Now, there is, of course, big debates on whether that affects the tone, the sustain, or playability of an instrument, but today is not time for that kind of debate. So while I'm pulling out the screws, I'm also holding onto the neck on the other side so things don't collapse on me. 4 screws attached to the heel plate, like so. The heel plate itself, and now the body comes loose. Now, sometimes there might be a little piece of card blank or something in there that gives a little bit of angle to the neck. This one didn't, this just has a flat. And there we are. So, the guitar neck, which consists of, in itself, it has the fretboard, which is a piece of wood on the top, which has the frets on it. Then the neck itself, and inside there is a truss rod. What a truss rod is most commonly nowadays, especially in modern guitars, it's a 2-way truss rod that you can adjust with an Allen key, Allen wrench, and then affect how the neck stays true, so it stays level. You can either have it completely flat, or you can have a little bit of a concave, or a little bit of a bow. Usually you try and avoid having a bow and then use the truss rod to fix that to come back to flat. A little bit of a concave, so a little bit of relief is what we call, in the middle of the fretboard is usually what feels the most comfortable to play because you have a little bit of relief in the neck. Relief always sounds like a positive word, so it makes sense that you would put that into this context as well. Then, as this is a bolt-on guitar, we have 2 pieces, the neck and the body itself. Now, as a Telecaster body, this is fairly standard. We have a pickguard, which protects when you're, well, exactly what it sounds like. When you're playing with a pick, it protects the body from you digging into the body of the guitar over time. So that is there to protect things. You have the bridge, the pickup, and then in this case we have volume and a tone pot. And good time to keep in mind that at full, tone and volume are, you know, what we call that, parallel to the neck, perpendicular to the neck. And then we have strap buttons to hold in your strap. So let's start with the easiest, removing the strap buttons. They have little felt pads just to kind of protect the guitar body. Put them there. And then put this one. It has a bit of a longer screw there. It's funny. Right. Then remove the pickguard. Now I'm not going to lay these out in a proper shape here because I'm not going to bother to do that. So I'm just going to null them in a nice manner. Now this, what I've been doing this entire time on the bench here is what's called knolling, or knolling. So K-N-O-L-L-I-N-G, which is putting everything into a nice order. I could be doing a better job at it, but it helps keep things on track of where things go when things are being put back into place. Now, very commonly, especially on Telecasters, or then the sister guitar to this, the Stratocaster, you would have the pickguard which would hold another pickup in place, or with the Stratocaster it would hold all the pickups in its place and have the pickup sort of suspended. In this case, we just have it more as a visual aspect for this particular guitar. I'm going to put that there just because there's more space. Right, so pulling off knobs. There are a few different kinds of knobs that you might come across. There's these, which are push fit. Then you have ones that have a screw on the side that you actually screw into the potentiometers. But to remove these, there's a couple of ways you can go about it. For instance, you could use a piece of wood to kind of try and get it in there and pull up so you don't damage the surface of the paint job. Sometimes they might be a little tough to get off, and I usually go for a softer piece of wood so I don't damage anything. So we have the volume. Let's see if we can get this under there. There we go. And it's coming loose. Whoop.
Yep.
Whoop. Whoop. Up.
Yep, yep.
Yep. Whoop. Up. Before I start to remove the entire bridge component and the pickup or the pots themselves, we need to go onto the back. So at the back of the guitar, we have the control cavity. Or most commonly, I mean, this is a very non-typical Telecaster. This is actually what the Telecaster would look like on the top. So this would be on this side, and you would have all the controls in a plate on the front. But for this particular guitar, the front control plate was used as a back plate. So we're gonna open that up there. Handy little hole so I can actually pull that out. And now we come to the electronics. So in order for us to pull the electronics out, we do need to disconnect the pickup itself. And we might, depending on how we can get the jack to come in, we can either pull it out from this way or we might have to disconnect that too. So let's have a look. But first and foremost, we need to put our soldering iron to heat up. Now this can seem daunting if you haven't done any sort of electrical work before. And I gotta be very honest, for the longest time, I really didn't like doing any type of electronics on any guitars. I hated it, but I've grown to love it over the time. All right, now in this case, we also have, I'll turn it over here. So we have the jack attached with a jack plate. There are multiple different sizes and shapes and ways and different kinds of jacks that you might come across, but to be very honest, this is probably the most common one you'll find and see. So it's just a plate that holds the jack itself, which is this part right here, which is where your instrument cable goes in. And so, just gonna remove, there's one screw missing, so it's good to keep in mind which screws we take out. So the top two and one at the bottom. There we are. And let's loosen that nut there, find the correct size there. So this also has a nut and then a washer and the plate itself. And let's see if we can pull that out into the cavity. It doesn't look like there's all that much space to do that, so we have to remove the jack as well. The jack consists of two connection points, or I should say three. So we have the hot live output, and we have the ground, and then we have the connection point for your input jack. And I am probably going to put that on the screen because I do not remember which is which ever.
Run out.
We did?
Well, I don't know, is that recording cancelled?
There's still space.
Why did you say recording cancelled?
Could have overheated.
No, it did. Was getting
Yeah, it's okay.
Alright.
Yeah. So I'll have it on the screen because I can never remember it. But there's the sleeve. I believe that the ground is the sleeve. Then there's the hot or the live. I can't remember the terms. They have terms. Let's see if, yep, our soldering iron has warmed up. So we're just gonna remove these like so. Gonna put that there. And now we can remove the remaining pieces of wiring. So we have the guitar has two wires that are connected to the volume pot. We have the ground, which is this black wire here. We have what is called a coil split, which is just, it's not connected to anything, so we'll leave that as it is. And then we have the green, in this case being the hot output, that we're gonna remove like so, and like so. And very important as well that you do not overheat anything. And you can use pliers as well to kind of make things easier. And I shouldn't have removed the washers and nuts quite yet, because that would have been easier. They would have held everything in place. There. Now, we are not going to be doing a full sort of tutorial on how to wire up an electric guitar. So we're not going to take everything apart. We're just going to take things apart to this stage. Now there's one more wire that's connected, and this goes underneath the bridge. That is what we call the bridge ground. And that essentially helps the entire circuit from not giving feedback when you're playing, especially at higher volumes. So we're gonna put those back in there for now. And now we're gonna flip the guitar over and start removing the bridge and pickup. So now that we have everything disconnected, this is gonna come out fairly well. And the bridge itself consists of a few different pieces. There's the bridge itself, so the bridge plate, and then saddles. Now, these are what the strings rest on and give you your intonation point at the bridge. Your other intonation point is at the nut, so at the very, very back, and that length in between those 2 points is what is called a scale length. So that is pretty much where your scale of your guitar rests and where you can find all the chords, which are then all the placements of your frets, essentially. We are not going to remove the saddles because everything is currently as it stands. It was set up and I believe intonated, so we won't need to do intonation later on. But when we put everything back together, we'll check for intonation as well, just to make sure. That's a bit snug in there, so there we go. So far, there's, out of the 4 screws I've taken out, they've all been different. So it's good that I'm laying them out in the way that they came out as well. All right, now everything is disconnected. We can pull this bridge out. We'll come back to that in just a little second while we remove the electronics. So this is the bridge ground. As you saw, it was right there underneath the bridge, making contact with the base of the bridge here. So we're going to pull that out, and now we can remove the electronics. Right, that is the body done. What is left is removing the pickup. And the pickup is held in place by 2 screws and springs to help adjust the height. Why you need to adjust the height of the pickup is for, well, several different reasons. But mostly it boils down to tone. The closer the pickup is to the strings, the more volume you will have, and the further away it is, the less volume you'll have. And it might be a part of personal preference how you want to set that up, but you don't also want the pickup to be too close to the strings because it is a big magnet. So it will pull the strings down and possibly affect your tuning. Whereas if you have a pickup that is what we call very, very hot, so it has a lot of output, you might want to lower that pickup just to make it clean up a little bit. There we are. There we are. Pull those screws through. Bridge. pick up. There, there, and there. So as a very quick overview of a guitar that's pretty much completely disassembled and ready to be reassembled again, this is the basic premise of what that would look like. So now for part 2, and this is the part that I did not tell the cameraman about. So I know how to put together a guitar, but you don't.
I see.
So we're going to do a little switcheroo. I have been discussing all the reasons why things are the way they are. Hopefully some of that has subconsciously trapped into your head, and we'll see how you do. So we're going to take a little break here while we switch around the mic and everything else, and we'll see you in a bit.
Okay. This is like this. It'll just end here. We're just gonna get stuck here and not have anything else.
I don't know where they go.
We'll go with these ones. Now this feels like I don't know.
This one, I don't know what the point of this is.
We'll see if it explodes later.